Hello and welcome to Low Carb Conversations. I'm your host, Leah Williamson, and I'm with my co-host, Holly Jean. Welcome, Holly.
Hi, Leah. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. We've got a great guest today, internationally known medical and emotional intuitive and licensed professional counselor with over 30 years experience, Katie Beecher. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you for having me.
Had a lot of words to get out then.
Right.
We're really excited to talk to you today, Katie, because you have a new book out called Heal From Within, a guidebook to intuitive wellness. And I just love your mission to help as many people as possible connect to their intuitions, find unconditional love and self-acceptance. Oh, that's just so lovely. So I'm really excited to talk to you about your story, the book. We've got so much to cover today, how we can connect in with our intuition. But first, let's tell listeners who you are and how your journey came about.
Like I said, I've been doing this stuff for about 30 years. And I started my healing journey from having a pretty severe eating disorder and depression. And I really didn't want to live anymore. I was throwing up 3 times a day and doing all the stuff that goes along with having an eating disorder. And it was partly from being bullied because I went through puberty really early, and then partly from a dysfunctional family situation. So I really believe it was divine intervention that made me call my pediatrician when I was 16. I didn't tell my parents, I didn't tell anyone. And I called them and I told them what I was doing. And it was 1983, so they weren't really as concerned with eating disorder stuff. They weren't really talking about it that much. So he said, I think you'll be fine. And I fortunately had the sense to say, no, I'm definitely not. And he gave me the name of a Jungian psychologist who really did save my life. And I had a car and a job, so I went by myself. She taught me how to connect to intuition, and she taught me how to not be afraid of like my psychic abilities and being empathic and the energies that I was picking up that was really scary, and just how to listen to my body, how to find self-love, how to communicate with my eating disorder and my body like they were friends instead of enemies, trying to find the purpose. And it really definitely was one of the best things that have ever happened to me. I can honestly say that. So from there, I became a therapist, always worked really intuitively. And about 12 years ago, my mom became sick and I had to basically stop my life and take care of her. And that changed the trajectory of everything. It really made me think about, what do I want to do with my life? And I was an artist at the time too, is being an artist and a therapist doing enough? So wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but I heard about something called medical intuition. And Mona Lisa Schultz wrote a great book about it. There's a workshop center near where I used to live in Connecticut, and there's a 3-day workshop going on. So I said, what the hell, I'll try it out. And didn't think I'd be able to do it at all, but she just said, I'm going to give you a name and an age and tell me everything you can. And I just started seeing what people looked like, what they looked like when they were kids, things about their personalities, their families, their like really every single thing that had to do with that person. I was pretty blown away. And then I, realized I could do this and have been doing it ever since.
Oh, wow. That's quite an amazing journey that you've had. And I loved one bit that you said that you became friends with your eating disorder rather than enemies. And so many people going through health journeys really feel at war with their body, especially autoimmune conditions or chronic illness. They feel
Exactly.
like it's not their body. And so hopefully we can explore some ways today that people can connect with their intuition and start to build that relationship with their body instead of fighting it. I think it's such an important message for people.
I agree. And if we're fighting things all the time, you're always in fight or flight mode. You can't ever relax. That's not great for your immune system either. And it just sets up this thing like you can't even be comfortable in your body. So how can you listen to your intuition or the signals that your body is giving you if you're not even in it?
Yeah. And that's one big thing too. Holly and I are functional nutritional therapy practitioners, and we're trained to look for signs and symptoms in the body, or listen to the client talk about their signs and symptoms in the body. And so many people ignore those signs. The body is constantly telling us these little messages all the time that something needs to happen or change or something's going on. But people are so disconnected these days. Yeah. What do you think? You probably see a lot of people this way. What do you think is causing this disconnection?
I think there's so many factors. Trauma can definitely be a huge factor. An illness too. But a lot of us, when we go through trauma or our bodies feel uncomfortable or sick, or we get mad at them or whatever, a coping mechanism is to try to get out of our body and to be in another world, meditate, which is great stuff, or whatever, just kind of being in the clouds and not being present. So living in the past, what couldn't I do before and I really miss, or what's going to happen in the future? You're not present, you're not in the now. And if you're not in the now, you can't be in your body either. And I think it's a human coping mechanism, but it's been taught to us by other people who were not comfortable in their bodies either, so it's learned stuff, but I don't think it's especially productive. I think it's very counterproductive.
Yeah, so true. So you've written a new book called Heal from Within, a guidebook to intuitive wellness. Tell us about the book. I actually have picked it up and been flicking through the book, and I'm enjoying it so much. You talk through chakras. So when we're explaining the book, maybe just give our listeners who might not be familiar with chakras so much, or maybe heard the word, not quite sure about them, maybe give a little explanation about that as well.
Sure. So it starts off with a little bit of my backstory, about my own healing and things. And then I talk about how to help people connect with their intuition and with their bodies. And the whole book is full of information from my personal guides, and also my experience and techniques from Jungian psychology. So it's kind of a nice mix of all those things. And it was very important to me that it be based in fact and based in science. So everything has been checked and verified. And it's also important to a publisher, or it should be, but sorry, but so I divide, when I do my readings and also in the book, I divide the body up by chakras, which are energy centers in the body. And each chakra corresponds to a certain place in the body parts, organs, things like that. And it also has a set of accompanying spiritual and emotional components too. So an example would be your fifth chakra, which is the throat area. It does have to do with the throat and your neck and shoulders and things physically, but then it's also about self-expression and talking too much. Maybe you reveal too much, or you don't reveal enough, or words aren't your easiest way of revealing things and about being authentic. So you have to figure out how to express yourself. But that's just kind of a quickie example. But I find patterns. People who have been through like a sexual trauma situation often will have symptoms in their second chakra, which is around the hip and reproductive areas. But every part of the body, every chakra influences the rest of the body as well. So it's not so much about energetically healing the chakras. It's about looking at the physical, emotional, and spiritual root causes for your unhappiness, for your illness, for whatever, and also your strengths, and putting all of those together and identifying what you need to work on, what you want to work on, how something going on in this part of the body is impacting something going on another part of the body. So it's really looking at the whole person and giving a very holistic, complete picture, which I
love that. Yeah. Which is the way it should be. So much so in modern medicine,
exactly.
It's just isolating one area and not looking at that root cause. But I love that you're looking at the system as a whole, the whole body, because we are the whole body, and it includes emotions, physical, everything.
Right. And everything we've ever been through impacts us. And even our family, even, when I do my reports, every single little weird fact comes up now and in the past, and even with family history or traumas or anything at all. People come to me for like an autoimmune thing, and then my guides will reveal that they're in a pretty unhealthy, unhappy relationship, and they don't really get the connection. And they'll say, well, when I feel better, I'm going to leave. And I'm like, doesn't work that way. You have to look at everything, and the relationship may be creating a lot of the symptoms.
Yeah. It can be quite confronting for people to face that as well. So a lot of time they probably know inherently inside what the issue is, but it's a lot of not wanting to address it because it's an uncomfortable situation.
Definitely. Yes. So I being a therapist has helped a lot.
Yes, I can imagine. We have this Chinese barefoot doctor around the corner from us who comes to our yoga studio quite often to give chats, and he's always saying, we have this joke. It's like, go and see him. He'll tell you the issue with you is your relationship. It's your relationship either with your partner, or your children, your mother, your father. It's somewhere in there's a relationship, right. but that's not really Jungian theory either, though, is it? It's like more looking.
Well, it kind of is.
It is. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Jung was very, very into symbolism and how your body talks to you through the symptoms and through symbolism, and how everything is connected, and listening to your intuition, developing self-love, all of that stuff. So that type of therapy for me was a perfect match. And I don't think I could have gotten better without working with a Jungian therapist personally.
Yeah, great. I was more meaning, I think it was like, was it Freud? Freud. That's a bit of a slip of the tongue. Who always blamed it on your mother or father.
Correct. Yes, that is true. That's true.
All right. Well, your book, it's amazing book. It's got so much great information in it. It goes through all the chakras. So even if somebody's just even interested in learning more about the chakras and how they connect, It's just such a great idea to have a look. So people can pick that up through the usual like Amazon, those type of places.
Yeah, everywhere. Yes.
Great. And I know obviously we can get it in Australia for our Australian listeners. So look out for that. We'll put a link into the show notes for everyone so they can have a look at the book. And just one quick question before we move on. If people do want to reach out to you and work with you, do you want to give a little explanation of, we'll link up to your services, but maybe just give people a little idea of how your services work, just so they know.
Yeah, absolutely. So people find me through my website. It's katiebeecher.com, often from an article or referred by other people or whatever. And I get their name and age and their contact information. Just using that before seeing a picture or talking to them, I create a very detailed 4-page report, and it lists every single thing about their life that is impacting them, strengths and stuff that they're struggling with. So not just sick people contact me. And then I also create intuitive soul paintings out of watercolor, and those are different for everyone. This is just like one example, but there's zillions of them, like they're all different. And that also, they get more information through my guides using symbolism, the different colors, where things are, what I create for them. So it's really a very big picture. And then we problem solve and look at, what things can we work on? What things can you work on? What route do you need to take? And if there's anything medical, because ethically and legally, I cannot diagnose, which some people who do this work do, but anyway. So I give symptoms and I identify things. And I have people that I refer to that I trust who can then do some additional testing and treating and confirming what I've found as well, all different practitioners. So it's kind of a team approach if that's needed.
Yeah, great. That sounds like a really great approach to helping people there. And I'm sure you probably see people who have tried multiple different avenues and just not getting any success.
So many, so many. And it's so frustrating and so expensive. And so, yeah, by the time they get to me, in some cases, they're pretty kind of hopeless and feel like, am I ever going to get better? Which I get. So
yeah, definitely. Well, I'm going to pass over to Holly because we want to learn how to tap more into our intuition and help listeners with that.
That was also interesting. Thank you for sharing, Katie. I'm always fascinated by that whole like trauma and illness connection. And I know so many people that are just connecting those dots. And just before we move on, like I have a question, like, is it just as, it's probably not just as simple as acknowledging, yes, this has been something that's happened to me in my past, but can you just like acknowledge that and move on? Or is that something that takes like therapy and deep work or something? Or maybe once have that light bulb moment, be like, oh, okay, I'm now choosing to no longer let that affect me. That might be a very long answer,
but that's a great question. It's a great question. And I really find I'm very big on individualistic treatment and diagnosis and all that. And that's why everything I do is individualized. There's no protocols. It's just for that person. And that's another one of those cases where it really depends on the person. When did the trauma take place? Did they have support? Have they ever told anyone about it? What kind of areas did it impact? I don't think it's necessary for a lot of people to kind of rehash things and relive them. And that's part of the fear of recovery, is that someone's going to ask you to do that. And that's pretty traumatic. I feel like figuring out how it may be impacting you, if it's impacting you, how it may be, helping people to heal from this point on. So self-love and support and connecting with intuition so that you can be warned if you're ever around unsafe people again, or, a lot of the fear is that it's going to happen again. It happened once and I couldn't trust my intuition, but oftentimes we had intuitive warnings that we didn't listen to. So it's about feeling secure and safe, feeling supported by yourself and by spirit and your intuition, and then moving forward in a safe manner so that you can proceed with your life and not feel held back or in fear mode all the time because of the trauma.
Yeah, that's a great explanation. Thank you. I'm always curious about that because I know, like you said, like sometimes that talk therapy, like bringing it up again, that's just re-injuring.
Sure.
Body, so.
And also, like, I love Bessel van der Kolk's book about the body keeps the score, because a lot of stuff gets stored in our body. And that's why I love dance and movement and art therapy, because we don't always have the words, or especially if it happened when we were young, we don't really have words, or maybe words are scary, but expressing things symbolically or through movement is so healing. And it's just such a lovely, complementary approach.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, I want to talk about this first article here. It is from Body and Soul, and it's talking about how we're all born with intuition, and it just gives some tips on how to tap into it. And it basically is saying that it's like any skill, and the more you work at it and the more you practice, you can get better at it. And really the article's about this one woman, the article's author. It's about her spiritual journey and how she's just learning to trust herself and her intuition. And I know Leah and I talk a lot about like mind-body connection when it comes to health and wellness. So I think this is just like an extended arm from that, just going a little bit deeper. But do you want to share a little bit about how intuition plays a role in your practice, and how do you help people even identify with that if that's something that's kind of foreign to them?
Absolutely. It's essential to my practice. It's something that I teach every single one of my clients, because it was so instrumental in my own healing and my own spiritual development. And I have a very Jungian view of intuition. which is that it's this all-knowing force. No problem. It's an all-knowing force that's part of everyone. It's a source of unconditional love and unconditional acceptance. When we make contact with it, we are never alone, even if we're by ourselves. I kind of describe it as this perfect bodyguard, this perfect parent that a lot of us never have had, and something that you just feel like has your back. So in addition to giving you guidance, it has a more expanded role. And my favorite way of connecting, and this is all described in my book too, is to physically write out a question or statement or your feelings and direct it to your intuition, which, as you said, it could be a really weird concept. So I say, maybe you write to God, maybe you write to the universe, maybe you write to the trees, maybe you connect with a loved one who's passed. It doesn't really matter who you write to, as long as it's some kind of like loving force. And so you write to them, ask your question, talk about your feelings, whatever the thing is. There's no rules. And then just sit and wait for whatever you hear back in response to what you wrote, and write that down. And then write back to it. And then whatever you get, write that down, write back to it. So you're having a written conversation with your intuition. And what you hopefully will create is a dialogue of non-judgmental love and acceptance, of guidance, of a place that you can go anytime. Sometimes I do it for 5 minutes. Sometimes I do it for 20. It really doesn't matter. And I also use this technique to talk to symptoms and to talk to the body. It's the same kind of thing. So talking to it like it's your friend instead of your enemy. With the eating disorder, I would literally say, like, why are you here? How can I help you heal? What are you trying to help me learn? And instead of treating it like it was this horrible monster that had control over me, it was very empowering to realize that I could have a dialogue with it, and that it wasn't a damaging part of me. It was there to help me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so helpful. And I think that's really helpful advice for anyone that might be listening, because I think there's something that happens when we grow up where we kind of stop listening to that voice. And whether it's the voices of other people around us, authority figures, or the world or media, everyone has their opinions and their views that they push out. And so we start burying that little voice. And so to get back connected, we do just need to ask those questions. I know there's an exercise I do with clients, because we talk about the gut brain connection a lot, where it's just like lay down and actually put your hands on your stomach and ask yourself a question and try to like listen, because there's always going to be that little whisper to pick up on. But I love how you say the things are there to help us, because they are. Our symptoms are there telling us, hey, there's something wrong. But we're so commonly told that it's normal or so common, and to just ignore it. And I know we'll get to that in another article, but just being aware to understand, like you said, that they're there to help us. And I know something else Lee and I always say, it's like, if you're coming at your symptoms, or you're coming at an illness as this form of, I need to tackle this, or I need to attack it, it's like you're like waging a war against yourself. Correct. And then who wins? Who Correct. Wins that fight, right? So I think that's such great advice. Then this article, she talks about how a few ways that we can learn how to enhance our intuition. So these are just some of her ideas. She says to get still, like have fun with it, journaling, like you mentioned. I like how you said to write to someone that you're connected with, or to get out in nature. Do you want to talk a little bit about our connection with nature, or like grounding and energy? Is that something you go into as well?
Oh gosh. Yeah, absolutely. It's, again, it connects to the being out of body thing. And nature is very grounding. just being barefoot outside or just being in nature, it's very grounding because it connects you with the earth. It's very mindful, because instead of thinking about what am I going to make for dinner and what's on TV and what's like, all the crap that we think about all the time, it's, oh, I can hear the birds chirping, or what is that bug doing? Or, even, oh, the bug is biting me. Like it puts you in your body. It makes you present. So, and it's just relaxing. Like, I don't know how many studies have been done on just being, around water or being in nature, just putting you in a different space. And so if we're calmer and we're not in fight or flight mode and not distracted, it's so much easier for our intuition to talk to us and for our body to talk to us. It can be hard to be alone with yourself. It can be really hard, because then you have feelings and you feel your body, and, like all the things we try to avoid through addiction or whatever, it can be scary. So sometimes I just have to work with people on being comfortable, just not even thinking at all. And, just kind of being there.
Yeah. I'm glad that you brought up comfort, because I think the uncomfortableness of just not having something to do, because we don't ever just sit anymore. Like even if we have to wait a couple minutes at a red light, people are checking their text messages or scrolling. It's like it's so foreign, this idea of just having a couple minutes to be in our thoughts. We're constantly needing to be consuming something. And so I think that probably plays a big role in it too. I always find that like my biggest aha moments, my best ideas, my best everything always happens in the shower. And I don't know if it's like that water connection or if it's because no one's bugging me, or kind of like being in the shower puts you in a little bit of a hypnotic state.
Right.
And so I don't know. That's what always works for me. What about you, Leah? When do you connect to your intuition, Leah?
Well, as I mentioned on the podcast, I'm actually playing the crystal sound bowls. So for me, I found it very hard to sit still with so much going on and so much noise. Even though I teach yoga, I'm usually sitting there wondering what the next thing is that I'm going to be saying, I have all these things going on. So I needed an outlet for me. So I've been using sound therapy to connect with my chakras, which is why I find your book so interesting, because each one of my bowls is one of the 7 chakras. So,
ooh, nice.
Yeah.
There are sounds that correspond with them, as well as colors, as well as, it's a really, it's very fascinating.
Yeah. So that's what I've been using.
I like that. So with doing the bowls, like how Katie, you mentioned, like doing things like art and dance and movement and stuff, would like the sound therapy in the bowls, would that kind of fall into that artistic expression?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And also just getting feelings out of your body. And, like I happen to pole dance. That is my thing. Not like for a living, which is fine. If that's what you do, that's fine. But for me, it's become my addiction, and it's my body image is improved. I just feel more of a connection to my body. I'm stronger. I've met amazing people. It's always a challenge. It works your butt off, so it really, for me, has been, if I'm obsessing about my book or doing something, my husband's always like, do you have class tonight? Because you need to have
I love that.
Nice.
I just sometimes when it all gets too much, I'm just like, right, kids and husband, let's get in the car. We're going for a bushwalk, and we just escape to nature. I think that's something simple that you can really do. And we'll just take a country drive, get to the bush, go for a bushwalk, and we all come back so much calm and peaceful.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, let's
get that sun on you.
We started talking about it a little bit with symptoms, but I think this is something that is so common. So I want to move on to this next article, because I think that we'll have a lot of really great takeaways for our listeners within putting it all together. So go ahead, Leah.
Yeah, well, Katie, I was scrolling through your Instagram, not while I was sitting at the traffic lights, and and I came across you had a discussion on medical gaslighting, and I think it's such an important topic to talk about, and it's not being talked about nearly enough. Although this article we found was on one of the big news stations or whatever in the US. But yeah, do you want to talk us through a little bit like what medical gaslighting is, and maybe what kind of some of the things that you've seen and what people should be doing about this?
For sure. So many of my clients have been sick for so long, have had symptoms for so long, whatever. And it's happened to me too. It's totally happened to me where something's wrong, something's off, you just don't feel good. And you go to somebody, a doctor, who you think, oh, they're going to tell me what's going on, or they're going to help me relieve my symptoms or something. And so they do their little battery of tests, whatever the insurance company will pay for. And, you get the results back. And if they're in the normal range, which can mean so many things, if they're in the normal range, there's nothing wrong with you. And even just like ferritin is an example, the range here is like 20 to 200 and something, but, the optimal range is different. So it's like, it can be okay on paper, but it can have tons of symptoms if you're not in the optimal range. And that's just like one simple example. And try to get a doctor to even test for ferritin, another story. But so, yeah, or they'll try to say, there's nothing wrong, therefore you need therapy or you need medication.
Like it's in your head or something like
right.
that. They're not, yeah.
Or
you're just making these things up. You're unhappy at home. So you're.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. I've had people tell me that they were told they just need a boyfriend or a girlfriend, or it's like, are you freaking kidding me? But you basically are told not to trust your intuition, not to trust your body, that they know far more than you do. And that, or just deal with it because we don't know what's wrong. They rarely admit that they don't know what's wrong, because then they have to do something else with it. But it's mostly like, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing we can do for you, and move on because my next patient's here. So, and, I know, like I've said, for me, for so many people, that eventually you learn that your intuition was right, and that the thing you thought was wrong actually was, or that there was something wrong. I had a client who had a brain tumor, a young girl, and she kept getting told there's nothing wrong, you have headaches, there's nothing wrong. She had a premonition that she had a brain tumor. She thought it was that, and that's what it turned out to be. And her father's a doctor. So it's kind of a, he started to trust her more.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's unfortunately something that, because that happens so often, people learn that they can't trust their bodies, or they learn that they can't safely tell anyone about how they're feeling emotionally or physically, that they are going to be ridiculed, that, they pay so much money seeing, it even happens with alternative practitioners. It's not just traditional medicine, but I think it's important to trust your intuition, to trust yourself, to look at a lot of different avenues in terms of physical, emotional, and spiritual things that contribute to your quality of life and your health, to not give up, which is hard, because if you've been ridiculed or told,
it can be quite difficult.
Definitely. And a lot of people who see me have literally been through so much of that. And so the main thing I try to do is first listen, just be there, listen to what they're saying, and, validate that, okay, you have these symptoms, and you're right, this does feel like it's physical as well as emotional and spiritual. And let's explore all of this, and not just be another one of those people who says, well, I don't think there's anything wrong, and
yeah. And I think like I'm in the autoimmune world a fair bit, which, you know, I have Hashimoto's myself. So a lot of symptoms are often dismissed, especially in the early days.
Big time.
One thing we always say is like, be your own advocate, even as hard as it can be, just keep going. And that's what happened in my early days. Was I was so tired that I physically couldn't get out of bed, and I was only in my 20s. And my husband said to me, are you depressed? Do you need something? Like, why can't you get out of bed? And I'm like, I couldn't explain to him why I was so tired all the time. And I went to multiple different doctors. I went down a few, you know, rabbit holes that weren't even, you know, what the issue was, until one doctor out of, I don't know how many, finally turned around and said, have you ever had your thyroid tested? And that was, that was it. But it was so far along. But even then, a lot of the symptoms I was having still didn't happen to be resolved until I made my dietary changes. But I didn't know that. So I felt like, oh, there's still something wrong with me. I still don't know how to resolve this. And so I can understand why some people can be very like, I'm just going to give up. I'm just going to live this way. I'm going to be left with this, especially when they're being dismissed by medical professionals.
Exactly. Yeah. And you guys, the work you do is so important, because I think what doctors have like one class or something on nutrition in a way. Sort of. So, and food is medicine, and what we eat is so important. You know, that's how we get our neurotransmitters and how we get everything that we need. And so if our body's not processing things correctly, or not getting the right nutrients, or we have sensitivities, or, you know, whatever the thing is, I mean, that directly impacts how we feel.
Definitely. Holly, do you have any thing you want to say about gaslighting, or any questions? Medical gaslighting, that is. To be specific.
You don't want me to get off topic. I see.
I was going to say, can of worms there.
No, but I mean, I had similar experience too. And I think that's also something that leads us into these fields. It's our own journeys, right? Our own experiences. And like Leah, mine was the same, you know, just being dismissed. I don't need to get into it, but I think this is so important to just reiterate the fact that your symptoms are there, they're real. And like you said, Katie, it's just finding someone who's willing to listen. And maybe you don't have all the answers, but just telling someone, I hear you, I understand, I believe you, and I can help you. And whether that's referring to someone else, or like referring out to another like professional or a specialist, but just validating those feelings and letting them know that I hear you, I believe you, you're not crazy, and I can hold your hand and walk through this with you.
And just even saying, I don't know, I'm not sure what's going on with you, I'm not sure how to help you, but let me see, you know, let me ask around. Let me see if I can read a little, or have, you know, talk to other people who may have encountered something like this before, or whatever, but not acting like you know more than that person, because that's really not fair.
And sometimes it takes a team, right? Like you were mentioning early on, Katie, it maybe that one person doesn't know, but they know somebody that can help refer you, and you work together on a combination of things. It's not, healing's not always linear and solo, and like the medical profession things, just fixing that one problem. That one problem may have been caused by a cascade of other events. Right.
Because like, even in your case, like, we all know stress and trauma and stuff can set off autoimmune reactions in the body. You know, if you have Lyme in there or viruses, it can set it off. So,
exactly.
And then having the thing and trying to work with all these people can cause freaking depression. So you may very well have depression and anxiety, but that's a whole separate issue from what else is going on in your body.
Exactly. And then there's so many layers of healing as well. And I love that you bring this other layer to it as well, because, I went through my, just using me as example, I went through my journey of, medical profession. I got the pill to help me to fix my thyroid, but that didn't really fix the symptoms. So I went down the dietary path, and then the diet was working really well for me until it wasn't. So then I've gone down the stress path and assessing my life and the lifestyle that I lead. And then now I'm on the spiritual journey. I know my throat chakra has been totally closed over for many years from I wouldn't even say it's like bad trauma,
Right.
like trauma has so many different levels. Trauma does not have to be something, but I just didn't feel I was heard when I was a child.
Sure.
So that's what caused, and you can see like a lot of the things that when you go back on that, so many different facets to healing. And I love that you bring this other addition in, but can connect it back to those other layers.
Yeah, it really is. And like you said, it's not linear, and you can be doing great, and then something in your life will happen to kind of bring you back to something, or you have kids and they reach a certain age and that's when you had an issue. And I mean, so it's kind of,
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it's been so interesting talking to you. I've absolutely loved this conversation. It's just like, this is all the things that I'm really like geeking out into at the moment.
Yay.
So thank you. Thank you for coming on the podcast, and your book, which is called Heal From Within. We'll link that up into the show notes so that everybody can grab a copy if they want to. And we'll make sure that they also connect with your website. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with us, Katie, before we wrap up?
I do have a Facebook group that I started for the book. It's free, it's private. So put my name in and then Heal From Within, and that comes up. And then if people do like reviews or share it, I have some free gifts that I'm sending out and stuff, and drawing for a reading and all that good stuff. So, no, it's been really fun. You guys are great.
Thank you so much. And thanks for being on the podcast. Thanks, Holly. Anything else you want to add there at all?
No, thank you. This was great. I appreciate you so much, Katie. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that's the end of today's episode. Our theme music is created by Andrew Bowden, and production services are by Kevin Kennedy Spain of Disc of Light Media. Have a great week, everybody.
Have a great week.